how long do you think we've known that the Earth is round?
For thousands of years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to say this guy's name wrong.
Yeah.
He's a Greek mathematician, but it's Eratosthenes.
Oh, yeah. I think that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
About 2,500 years ago, he figured out how to measure the Earth because they knew then it was round.
Yeah.
But they didn't know how big it was.
Right.
I mean, when we look at like old maps and stuff, you know, just the known world, it doesn't, I mean, 2,500 years ago, it doesn't show like North America or South America or Antarctica or any of that. Hey man, how's it going?
Good.
So the other week we talked about some conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And one that you touched on was flat Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that I find flat Earth funny.
Yeah.
I just feel like, why? So I figured maybe we could talk about it a little bit today.
Okay.
First of all, what do you believe?
I don't believe that the Earth is flat by any means.
You believe that the Earth is round.
Yes.
Okay. And now, one of the claims made by the flat earthers is that we know less now, we knew more before. So they claim like old information is somehow more correct. But how long do you think we've known that the Earth is round?
For thousands of years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to say this guy's name wrong.
Yeah.
He's a Greek mathematician, but it's Eratosthenes.
Oh, yeah. I think that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
About 2,500 years ago, he figured out how to measure the Earth because they knew then it was round.
Yeah.
But they didn't know how big it was. I mean, when we look at like old maps and stuff, you know, just the known world, it doesn't, I mean, 2,500 years ago, it doesn't show like North America or South America or Antarctica or any of that. So do you know how they did it?
I don't. How did this happen?
Excuse me. So the way they did it was two like prominent larger cities at the time were Alexandria and a city called Syene. I believe I'm saying it right. Syene. They were very close to what they thought was the equator, and actually they are pretty close to the equator. So, and I've heard the story two different ways, and I'm not sure which way it is, but the point is the same. So, one way I've heard the story is that there was an obelisk in both of these cities, and another way is that I've heard that there's a well in both of these cities. So let's just talk about the well.
Okay.
So if you live there all the time and you use that well all the time, you'll look down the well and sometimes you won't be able to see the bottom because there'll be a shadow. And sometimes if the sun is high in the sky, you may see very little shadow. And then on certain days of the year, the sun will be perfectly right over top of it. And at that perfect time, you'll see no shadow. You'll be able to see straight down. So they knew how far away these two cities were from each other. So he coordinated with a friend in in the other city and decided that on a certain day, when his friend looked down the well, there was no shadow. And these were different days at different times. So what they decided to do was the well in Alexandria, at least this is the way I've heard it, one of the ways, they looked down the well at the exact time when there was no shadow. And they knew that exact time. And then his friend in the other city looked down the well, and then recorded how much shadow there was. Now, I've also heard this told with obelisks, basically like what the Washington Memorial is,
Yeah.
So the deal is if you're able to measure the shadow on the other one and there's no shadow here, you can figure out curvature. And he did this with such accuracy that he guessed that the Earth was somewhere between 24,270 miles to 25,050 miles in diameter. Nowadays, we've gone to space. We have technology. We happen to know that the Earth is 24,901 miles around at the equator.
Okay.
Which means he was only off by like anywhere from like 0.8% to maybe 2%. And he did this back in the day by measuring shadows.
Yeah. That's impressive.
Which it doesn't seem like that complicated of a way to figure this out, Like it didn't take space lasers and satellites and computers. We just did some math.
Yeah.
So if it's that simple to figure out, why do people, do you think the Earth is flat?
Well, I'm going to go with one of the most simplest reasons is because it is difficult to imagine in your head how large the Earth is. And it's even more difficult to kind of picture it as a sphere and to zoom in all the way until you can see a flat surface. Like a lot of people will take something like a tennis ball and they look at it and they're like, there is no flat surface on this thing. This is round, you know. So there's no way that the Earth could be this shape.
Right.
And since we're on flat ground, that's,
But if you took a microscope to that tennis ball.
But they're not thinking that. They're thinking, look, there's no way that something that round can have a flat surface. So that's one of the most simplest reasons, I believe.
But even to listen to their other arguments, I'm not sure how they hold up. I feel as if a lot of these arguments or beliefs are easily tested. And I just don't understand why they don't do that. Like, none of them can really agree what exactly the Earth looks like, whether it has a dome or not, or what's at the edge or anything. But I would say a common belief is that it looks like what I would call like a pizza shape. It's flat, and the North Pole would be the center of the pizza, and the outer rim, the crust, is what we would call the South Pole, but they say is an ice wall that protects the water from running off the edge of the Earth. Now, they also say that the governments of the world are protecting this ice wall to keep it a secret from the rest of us. But you don't think anyone would just go and take a picture of it? How come there's no pictures of the ice wall?
Yeah, that's a great question because I feel like as intent as a lot of the flat earthers are, they would be trying to, prove by fact and by pictures and evidence that the earth is flat. So they would have to present these things. But that's a great question. I would love to know some rationale into why they don't just do that.
Right. And plus, if you look at a map of, like, you've seen the Mercator map, right? The flattened Earth map that we mostly we had in like school and stuff, and it makes it's distorted because the Earth is round, and we're displaying it on a flat map. So you get weird distortions closer to the poles. Like Greenland looks like it's the size of South America,
Right.
which it's not. But on a flat Earth map, you get the same types of distortions. So if you were to look like, let's say it's laid out like they say it is, and the center of the map is the North Pole, and the outer edge is an ice wall. Well, if you just think about scale, if you, let's say you measure something in the middle of the United States, and you say, well, we happen to know this is 50 miles apart. So therefore, you know, whatever, a half an inch equals 50 miles. So whatever size map you have, you know. Then if you try to do the exact same scale in the Southern Hemisphere, like for, let's say, Australia, then it doesn't make sense, because you could go to Australia and measure out 50 miles, then look on the map, and it doesn't line up.
Right.
So wouldn't that tell you
Yep.
that you're going in the wrong direction?
That should be a very clear indication.
Right. I mean, isn't that an easily... I mean, we don't even need, like, specialized equipment to do that. You could just reset the tripometer in your car and drive 50 miles in one direction, and then you'd roughly call that... I mean, maybe it wouldn't be accurate to, like, you know, a tenth of an inch or something like that, but it'd be roughly accurate.
Yeah.
What's so difficult about that? I don't understand.
Yeah, there's a lot of these, you know, examples that you could throw out there that kind of like automatically shut down that flat Earth. But it's a little bit entertaining to have all of this, these examples and all of this knowledge to know that the Earth isn't flat, and all these tests to prove it, and then people still just want to disagree.
Yeah, I find it entertaining, but I also find it troubling.
Well, yeah, I agree with that too, because it's not just like it's a kind of people wanting to just disagree to disagree. This is like a solid belief, like a solid.
Yeah, and they fight to the end over it.
Yeah, and it does get pretty frustrating because, you know, something so simple. I didn't want to get into this so early, but something as simple as like the sunset. I mean, almost similar to that.
Yeah.
You know, but like the sun will set in like the East Coast in the United States, but it's not like that same way in the West Coast.
Right. Well, and the way they try to prove that is they say that the sun and the moon and everything we see in space isn't as far away as all the scientists say it is. They say that it's very close to us, and that it's more like a spotlight that revolves around the North Pole, which doesn't make any sense, because if it was flat, even if it was on the other side of the map, you'd be able to look out and see it.
Right. Yeah.
But they say you can't, because you'd be looking through that much atmosphere.
I'm confused.
I find it entertaining, but I also find it scary in the fact that they're using their platforms to convince other people. And I feel like all of this can be easily disproved, but most of them won't take the necessary steps to disprove it, like to go to the ice wall. Right. And they'll have an excuse. They're like, no, the military's protecting that, and they'll kill you.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
Will they?
Yeah. So
then how come you can go on like a trip planner and order tickets to Antarctica?
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Does the theory of gravity have anything to do with the flat Earth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another good one. So, you know, the reason why our planet is round, and we look up and we see everything else is round, like the sun and the moon and all the other planets in our solar system, is because of gravity. So when you say that, they say, well, see, that's the thing. Gravity doesn't exist. And then you say, well, how are you stuck to the Earth? And they can't explain it, but they have theories. So one of their theories is, have you ever taken like a balloon and like rubbed it on the carpet, and then you could like stick it to someone's...
Yeah.
So it's like static cling, right?
Yep.
Okay. So one theory is that the Earth has a static field which causes all of us to cling to it.
Okay.
But the problem with that is if you talk to any type of like electrical engineer, they'll quickly tell you that the amount of force, amount of static cling it would take to hold all of us down, we would not be able to have the electronics we have. It just doesn't work that way. We would have circuit boards that are short circuiting all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how does that affect like vehicles and planes? Like, is that still the same?
How do you explain an airplane?
Yeah.
Well, then another idea they have is because they see that they take little tidbits that scientists say and then they co-opt them for themselves, but they don't normally fully understand everything. So, we can measure gravity. We know the rate in which gravity works. So one of the things they're saying is that we are on a flat disc or a pizza-shaped thing, but we are accelerating upwards at that speed. So therefore, that's why things are falling down, because they're not actually falling down. The ground is coming up at us at that speed. But the issue with that is if that was the case, in just a couple of years, or maybe even less, you'd reach the speed of light, which, Einstein talks about space-time and not being able to travel faster than light or even at the speed of light. So how do you account for that?
Yeah, that's
if we were constantly accelerating.
Yeah. Like the Earth is spinning. Like
No. They're saying it's like a pizza and it's going upwards and we're standing on the bottom of it or on the top of it.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to me. That seems so ridiculous.
Yeah. and then when you dive deeper into it, it just gets more and more like conspiracy ridden, like how do I say this? It sounds like everybody is in on it. So like so far, from what we've talked about, they blamed all the countries in the world, and they also blame some large religious groups. Like they'll say, like the Vatican and the Pope know about this, and they've known about it forever. But even past that, so one of the operations or nuclear test programs that the United States had was an operation called Operation Fishbowl, which took place in the Solomon Islands. And we were talking a little bit about this off camera, but it was where they did high altitude nuclear tests because they wanted to know what would happen if enemies did that to us. Could it knock out satellites? Could it knock out ground communications? Could it cause some type of like electromagnetic storm? And so we did that, which I don't think is one of our smarter moments, nuking the atmosphere. But we did. And we did it several times, and it was all part of this Operation Fishbowl. And it happened in 1962. And flat earthers will cite this as I guess evidence that the U.S. government knows that we're living on a flat plane, because some of them believe that there is a dome over us, or they'll cite the Bible and they'll call it the firmament, and they'll say that is what's containing all of our air and everything else inside of the area we live in. And they say this 1962 experiment that we did with nuclear weapons was an attempt to blow a hole in it so that we could escape our prison that we live in. If we live in some dome, but that's easily disproved for the fact that we've had satellites and other things when they hit the dome.
Yeah.
But going back to that belief, generally people that say that the Operation Fishbowl was something to an attempt to blow a hole in it. They also say, and I took this off of Wikipedia. It says, in addition to these, it is their common belief that the United States government has a plan to create in Europe, a new America open to everyone, where the only value is consumerism, and that George Soros will command a satanic globalist conspiracy. They reject the past instances of dinosaurs, Darwinism, the theory of evolution, and the authority of the scientific community, and they claim that they're all part of the Freemasons.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like
it's
like as you start to tumble down this hole, it just gets more and more. So George Soros is commanding a satanic what?
And what does that have to do with the flat earth? This is so bizarre. It's so bizarre.
Well,
oh, man.
I feel as if the flat earth is more of a mindset of distrust.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they distrust in our governments, and they like when we say when the government says this is what's going on, they go, oh, well, we can't believe them.
Okay. Okay. I understand. Well, I can understand that to a certain extent, where the government may not be telling people the full truth about a lot of things, but I feel like the flat earth thing is just too far, because what would be the point of lying about it all? I mean, we've got multiple sources that show the earth is not flat. We've got multiple ways to disprove that the earth is not flat. Even something as simple as you started to just point out, that we've got spaceships and satellites that have left the earth and nothing has happened. We even have, I'm sure that they have bones to pick about, like pictures of Earth from space. But
well, one of the beliefs that they have is that the reason why they're doing it is for money and control.
That's why we're saying the Earth is round.
That's why we're hiding the fact that the Earth is flat.
Oh, okay.
And they say, well, look at NASA. NASA gets, anywhere from $2 to $4 billion a year.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that is like 0.5% of our budget.
Mm-hmm.
So
don't we have?
I mean, wouldn't they be able to come up with a better lie to siphon off more money?
They should. And don't we have like an international space station?
We do. And the other thing is that there are plenty of spacefaring countries in this world that don't like us.
Yeah.
So why would they go along with this?
Very true. Very good point. I mean, look, we need.
I mean, like if we hated each other and you were telling a lie, I'd probably screw you over and call you out for your lie.
Yeah, which is hurtful.
Yeah. I'm just telling you, that's the kind of backstabbing a-hole I am. But how come that doesn't happen?
Man, I don't. It is very difficult to try to like side with the flat Earth community on this. It's very difficult, even when in a lot of ways, sometimes you try to like see something from someone else's point of view. But this is a tough one.
Yeah,
this is a tough one to keep going with, because and I'm looking at an image here that shows what you're talking about, the flat Earth. It's just not believable. It's simply, why would we be the only thing out there that's flat? We've seen the moon.
Exactly.
It's round. Sun's round.
Well, and that's one of the things I look at. Like, even with a pair of binoculars, like a nice pair of binoculars, you can see actually quite a bit. Like, if you ever looked at the moon at night with binoculars, it looks sick. See all these mountain ranges and craters and stuff. But you can also look at other stuff. You don't need an expensive telescope. But if I was going to base my entire life around a certain belief, and for like a couple $1,000s, I could buy a really nice telescope and look at stuff.
Yeah.
Wouldn't I? But the point to that is I think even if they had a really nice telescope and they looked at stuff, and I'm not saying that they haven't, the way they account for all of that is they just say space is fake.
That's so so ridiculous.
It's like saying anything that they don't believe in, they just say is a conspiracy and is
Yeah.
fake.
Okay, so if space is fake, then where are we? Where is our flat Earth? I mean, it's still just accelerating, going up, but like where in the vacuum? And
Well, I haven't heard a good example for that, and they do at least have the ability to say I don't know sometimes.
Yeah.
So they'll go, we don't know, which is a fine answer.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so have you in some of your research have you come across
research,
Yeah.
you mean having a few drinks and watching some videos on YouTube and then laughing my ass off?
yeah, that's good research.
Yeah.
Have you seen anywhere where they describe like how like the depth or thickness of the Earth? Because and I'm asking because our oceans, you know, are thousands of miles deep.
Well, no, not thousands of miles.
So hundreds of miles, millions of miles. No, I'm just,
I think isn't the deepest part the Challenger, the what would you call it, a crevasse or the Challenger? Yeah, wouldn't you call it an ocean crevasse? Well, either way, I think that's like 7.5 miles or something.
okay.
Here, let's look it up. Challenger Deep. Oh, Ocean Trench is what they're calling it.
Okay.
And it is, oh no, I'm wrong. It looks like, well, they're saying it's up to 35,856 feet deep, which would be, well, that would be about 7 miles, wouldn't it?
About yes.
Yeah, because there's 5,200 and, what am I doing? I'm sitting right here in front of Google. Let me just, sorry. 2 miles. 6.7 miles deep.
Okay.
Okay. So, but still, that's deep. And then there's the cola hole, I think, the super deep borehole that was drilled in Russia to do experiments. Although they got to a point where it was so deep and it was so hot, and they were just burning up drill bits, and they started to think it started to become dangerous on how deep it was, so they stopped. But that thing is, according to Google, 40,000 feet deep. So I don't know exactly what they believe is the thickness of the flat Earth. I haven't heard like a consensus, but that's part of this whole thing. There isn't a consensus.
Yeah.
And I feel like just because there's a consensus doesn't mean that there's truth. So I'm not going to say that scientists are just correct because they have a consensus on a working model of what Earth and all of the other celestial bodies are.
Yeah.
I believe that they're right because they have actual evidence. But they don't even have a working model of how all of this is supposed to work together. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like they can say things like, oh, we're static clinging to the Earth, but that creates more problems in your model than it explains.
Right.
Saying it's gravity explains it.
Right.
But then they'll say things like, well, but scientists don't know exactly how gravity works.
Yeah, I've heard that since they dispute gravity because it's referred to as the theory of gravity, so that means that it's not true because it's a theory.
Yeah, well, there's two problems with that. One, just because we don't know how something works doesn't mean that we can't observe it. And number two, I guess I don't even know how to say this. Like in this scientific lexicon, a theory is something that's backed up by facts.
Right.
In, I would say, like the layman or like everyday speech that most people would use in public, theory means idea. But in science, idea is an hypothesis. So you'd have a hypothesis, you'd run some experiments, you get the data, which either supports or doesn't support your hypothesis. And if it does support it, then you write a paper about it, you throw it out there to the scientific community, then they have their own ideas, they run their own tests, and then together you gather facts and it becomes a theory.
Right.
Because I've heard that before too, like, well, then why do they call it a theory? I'm like, because it has facts. No, that's not what theory means.
Yeah.
And then I've got to go to Google and look it up and then show them, and they're like, well, I've never heard that before. And I'm like, well, just because you haven't heard it doesn't make it false.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just being an a-hole.
Okay.
But then the other thing they say is, have you ever heard of the Van Allen belts?
Yes.
Okay. So, with them calling space fake, they're basically also saying that any space agency, whatever they've done, is not real. It's all a hoax. So one of the ways that they say that we couldn't have gone to the moon is because of the Van Allen belts. And yes, the Van Allen belts do have a high level of radiation, and yes, it could be lethal. But if you look at the way NASA explains it, is we kind of flew through the weaker part to get to the moon, which is exactly what we're going to do for these new Artemis missions. But my question is if you're believing in the Van Allen belts, then how do you still believe the Earth is flat?
Correct. Yeah, because that's based on a spherical Earth.
I mean, it basically makes Earth like a giant magnet.
Yeah.
And have you ever seen a magnet where the center is one pole and then the outside rim is another? No, it's one side is one and the other side is the other.
Yeah.
I mean, how would that even work?
Man, I don't know. This is yeah. They should have gave up at this one.
Well, they have conventions.
The flat Earth believers have conventions.
Yeah, it's called the Flat Earth Society.
Yeah, see, this is going too far.
Yeah, and the thing is like they all gather together, and then it feels like they're all patting each other on the back because they're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And they're just like, yeah, that makes so much sense. And they keep saying things like, well, just use your own instincts, use your own abilities to measure things, just be a critical thinker and use common sense. Where some of these ideas on how to explain what our world actually looks like are simple ideas. Like I said, thousands of years ago, we were able to figure out, and by us, I mean human beings, were able to figure out approximately how large the Earth was just by measuring some shadows.
Yeah.
But other concepts aren't as simple. And I think they'd rather make them simple. And so the Flat Earth Society, or the group as a whole, tends to recommend to their members or followers, what would you call them?
Probably members.
Okay. To do their own experiments. So if you look on like TikTok or YouTube, you see tons of people on an airplane with a spirit level. So like one of those levels with a bubble in the middle. And they're holding it up, and they're recording themselves holding it up, and they're saying, look, if the Earth was round, we would see the plane dip to go around it. But you're missing the point of, one, how large everything is, and two, technically that's kind of happening.
Yeah.
But the plane is flying level, and level is actually a curve. It's not flat.
Yeah.
Over a vast enough or enough distance, I should say. So like during their conventions, they'll have like little booths set up, and they'll show their experiments. But doing an experiment on, let's say, like I was watching a video where a guy had a bucket of water and a beach ball, and the beach ball was floating in the water. And he spun it, and then he held it up, and he goes, how is water supposed to stick to the bottom of this ball? Now, here's the thing. A beach ball small enough to fit in your hand is not a correct substitute for the Earth, which is much larger.
Right.
I guess technically they each have their own gravitational pull, but the beach ball's gravitational pull is so weak compared to the Earth. So they say things like, how does water stick to the bottom? It's not sticking to the bottom.
Yeah.
Technically, the bottom would be the center.
Yeah.
I don't understand what's so complicated about that.
I don't know, because like I said before, sometimes that whole idea of kind of picturing how large the Earth is and zooming out is impossible for some people. I mean, it's because the Earth is so large, and we have like, once again, you just zoom in and then you get to a flat portion and you have a lake. And that is kind of out of the question for some people, because there's no way that on a round or a spherical object that you would have some sort of a flat surface where you could have some type of standing water, or so the whole thing just has to be flat.
Right.
But it's, I think that it sounds like you're going to have to infiltrate one of these conventions. And
I feel like they'd sniff me out right away and be like, hey, get out of here.
Yeah, you'll just have to keep an open mind.
Yeah. I have to work on my serious face.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's just go back a step. We were talking about telescopes before.
Mm-hmm.
If you looked up and everything was round, and your only explanation is to say that's all fake, but then at the same time you say, do your own experiments. Trust your own instincts.
Yeah.
So now you can't trust your own eyes?
No.
And then have you ever seen these high altitude balloons that like people will release to do experiments and stuff?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay, well, people have done this over the years, and there are videos online where people have attached like a GoPro, and they film the whole thing. Well, GoPros tend to have, and I don't own a GoPro, but I believe they all have like a fish eye lens, because they're trying to
right.
capture action, so wider the view, the better.
Yeah.
Well, a fisheye lens can distort the horizon to make it look round. So then they'll say, when people take pictures at high altitude and they show the curvature of the Earth, they go, that's just because it's a fisheye lens. And then they say, well, what about these astronauts who have looked out the window of like the space shuttle or the ISS? And they go, well, see, the thing is, and I heard one of them say this, over a vast enough distance, since your eyes are round, they're like fisheye lenses. So it just feels like they have an unprovable excuse for everything.
Yes.
Because that's not the way our eyes work. In fact, even if that was the way our eyes work, that's not the way our brain works. I was at this is a museum like, I don't even know, like 10, 15 years ago. And they had this display set up, and I'm pretty sure it was for kids.
Yeah.
But I'm a nerd, and I'm like, there were no kids standing there. So I was like, I want to play with this. And what it was is it was there were goggles that you'd put on, and they made everything appear upside down. When you first put them on, it felt weird because everything was upside down.
Yeah.
And if you left them on for a couple minutes, your brain corrected, and it just felt normal.
Yeah.
And then the messed up part was when you took the goggles off, it felt upside down again for a little while. Really kind of screwed me up, made me feel a little sick.
Yeah.
But if our eyes were distorted, which they are, I mean, we all don't have the same vision. Some of us wear glasses. You wear glasses. I don't know why you're not wearing glasses right now.
Yeah, I just have contacts in.
Okay. But I have contacts in.
Yeah.
And, those things help correct our vision, but our brain is actually like stitching together the images from both eyes, and there's all types of things that are happening for us to see what we see.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, like, it just feels like an endless amount of excuses. Like none of what they're saying is provable for what they're trying to prove, but they think it is because they don't understand like scale, like the beach ball compared to Earth.
Right.
Those are drastically two different sizes.
Right. Correct.
You can't do that.
Yeah. And there's no way to make that experiment right. There's no way to have like the beach to zoom in on the beach ball to see like I mean you can zoom in, of course you can use but there's nothing that you could do in that time that would like show them like that experiment is inaccurate or
well, I guess we could, but this would be another unbelievable scenario. If the beach ball was in space and it was outside of any solar system, just way out in dead space in the middle of nowhere. And all of the other gravitational effects of galaxies and solar systems and stars and stuff are so far away that the gravity is affecting it less than the gravity that the beach ball is producing, then at that point you could stick water on it and it would stick all the way around. But you can't do that on Earth because Earth's gravity is much more than the beach ball, so it's just going to pull it off.
Right. Well, I don't know. This is maybe we should have a flat Earth individual as a guest on our show.
Explain it to us?
Yeah. Because there's probably something that we're missing. I mean, even though we've got all this information to contradict the flat Earth theory, we're probably just missing something in this whole thing. And
I wish that I was, because I would find it so interesting. It definitely makes life more interesting to think that we're all living in some weird conspiracy. But they even take it further to say, that like dinosaurs and things like that don't exist. Like I read before about them thinking that it's all part of a, like almost like a satanic cult. But we have dinosaur bones.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you can't dispute that. Now, I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but I just wonder if the bones were put together correctly. And I only mention that because I saw this weird experiment where they were, whatever it was, they had animal bones, and they had like AI reconstruct this animal based on just the bones. And it was like a regular, like a dog, cat, rabbit, whatever. And it was totally different than the animal that it was. So,
people have been busted before by finding fossils and saying, oh, like I remember this was years ago. There was a story about, I think it happened in the 1800s. Someone, an archaeologist claimed to find bones, and I believe it was in China. It's definitely someplace in Asia. And they said this is proof of a dragon, and that dragons were real and they were just really small. But then once they started to investigate this fossil, they found out this guy had basically glued together like 3 different skeletons to make this so-called dragon. But there's obvious deception like that. But then there's also, are we getting it right? For the longest time we thought that like dinosaurs and stuff were all scaly.
yeah.
And now some people are starting to go, they might have had feathers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I guess some of that is a guess when we only have the bones.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I guess in some instances we find the bones laid out in the correct way. Like we'll have a dig and it'll all be in rock or something and we'll see the shape.
Yeah.
But we could still be getting it wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just...
But yeah, there's no way we're getting this flat Earth thing wrong.
And I've seen so many people say, well, why don't you just do these experiments like what we talked about? And I've even seen other YouTubers who maybe have an opportunity to do some of these experiments. Like there's a guy that I follow that's a pilot, and his videos are great. He describes like situations that pilots have to go through, and then like funny air traffic control things where like maybe some pilot gets angry at them, which you shouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you don't like the guy in the air traffic control, you shouldn't be yelling at him. You should be working with him. But he talked about flat Earth, and he was like, "Look, I make this trip from it was someplace in now I'm spacing out. It was what's at the bottom of Africa? Cape Town.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Cape Town to Australia."
Okay.
And he said he has to make this trip all the time. And he goes over part of Antarctica. And he's like, you can see it. And he goes, the company I work for, they do chartered flights on 747s, and then they also do cargo flights. Mm-hmm. And he's like, why don't you DM me? I can put you in touch with people in my company. A bunch of you guys can get together, charter the whole plane, and I'll fly wherever you want me to. Mm-hmm. And yet, you don't see any of them taking him up on that. Mm-hmm. Why? I mean, he even said in his video, don't trust me. Don't trust my equipment. Bring your own equipment. Bring your own GPS. Bring your own maps. Bring your own compasses or whatever else you need to prove this.
Yeah.
But they don't. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one other thing that would be nice is because if you're looking at like the flat map, you know, and say you're looking at the US and you're telling like a flat earther, like we would have to fly, you know, to like France.
Sure.
You know, and if you're looking at the map, like that seems like it's going to take a ridiculously long time. Or you like if you got to fly from the US to Russia, because they're looking at it like you got to fly all the way across the map. But like if you're in California, like you're not, I don't know. You can picture it in your head.
Well,
like,
if you're looking at it on a flat map, your flight actually might look curved.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing is that, I mean, they have those, I don't know if you've seen those magazines and on an airplane where, you know, they might show.
Sky Mall?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it shows like the path, you know, you have to, that a plane would fly to, you know, from like, you know, Atlanta to New York.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a curve.
Or I flew from Chicago to Singapore, and we went, well, not over the North Pole, but we went over Alaska. Mm-hmm. And we went, this was years ago, so we went over Russia, which you probably can't do now.
Yeah, yeah.
But we also went over China and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It would be like if you told me, you know, your car could fly. Mm. And then I said, no, it can't. That's not how cars work. And you said, fake news. And then just was just like, doesn't, you don't offer any evidence. And then I'm like, well, then make it fly. And then you're like, well, the government actually doesn't want me to fly it around here. And they said, if I fly it again, they're going to kill me. So I won't do it.
Oh, yeah. How convenient.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And just the sheer fact that like they'll picket and they'll vote and all of these, their beliefs affect people around them, because it's not like they live in an isolated community. They live all over the world in our communities.
Yeah.
And they're making decisions based on fake news.
Yeah.
I don't understand this new, I guess it's really not that new, but you see it a lot more. It's probably because of social media. Just the push of inaccurate information.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's crazy is that I still remember, which I shouldn't say that because it makes me sound old, but like when
and by the way, I'm a year older than him, so that doesn't make me feel good either.
But when like internet was like first available,
yeah,
and you know people would put things out there, so there was kind of like a little disclaimer, like you have to sometimes take what you see on there with a grain of salt, like you can't believe everything you see on the internet. And then as it's evolved, as more people have put things on there, as information just, you know, has become more readily available, there is a lot of truth, but you would feel like that sediment would still stick.
Yeah, there's still a lot of misinformation,
Yeah.
a lot of crap out there.
Yeah, but it was just that was a big thing when the internet was first available. Is that you had to look out for misinformation, but it seems like that's gone out the window, and the first thing you see, or you find something that just supports what you want to believe, and you don't really look for the full truth.
Yeah, well, the other thing would be is how conspiracies work, or I should say, like secrets work. If you have, let's say, a secret held between you and I told you, and then you promised me that you'd never tell anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, really, there's only like 2 points the secret can get out from,
Yeah.
and if we really trust each other, then it'll probably never get out.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say you had 50,000 people,
Yeah.
or 100,000, or 1,000,000. I mean, the amount of people that would have to keep this secret over what sounds like thousands of years.
Yeah.
How would not one person leak it?
Yeah.
It doesn't mathematically, it doesn't make sense.
Listen, I didn't tell anybody that you sleep with the teddy bear. So, is that what you're trying to get at?
That's just what I call her. No, it doesn't make any sense. And you're right. Maybe we should have a flat earther on here to explain it to me, because at every point I'm just like, but that's easily disproven. I mean, when we were talking about conspiracy theories before, I brought up that Netflix had, that documentary Behind the Curve.
Mm-hmm.
And there were several experiments that these flat earthers did. And it seemed like each one of them proved that the earth was round.
Yeah.
And then when they were confronted with it, they were like, well, we must have done it wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. Like, it was your experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you unwilling to accept the results?
Yeah. I don't understand that either. I mean, it's just because I think it's because they don't want their belief to be challenged or changed. They're not necessarily doing these experiments as proof, to find out like the real truth. They're just doing this kind of as a show because their mind is made up and there's nothing that's going to change it.
Or I wonder if some of it is like belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have a community that now believes in them and they believe in them, and there's a community there, and they feel like they finally belong to something.
Yeah.
And they don't want to. I mean, because if you're going to say it's a conspiracy, and then you set up your own experiment to prove your own thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then your experiment says the earth is round, then the question is where's that conspiracy? It was your experiment.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's definitely no conspiracy there so I don't understand that.
Well, I don't know. Just our conversation the other week made me think of that.
Yeah.
And I just thought it would be fun to explore a little bit more because, like I said, I find this entertaining. I mean, I also find it troubling.
Right, yeah.
But I honestly don't understand.
Yeah, and I think the more troubling, because like I just said, I don't think that any of the flat earth community wants to be necessarily challenged in that view. I think that they're kind of set in their ways, and no amount of experiments or data is going to change what they believe. I mean, I feel like it's kind of a set thing. Whereas maybe the rest of us, if we were told or shown some experiments that the earth was not round, that would be humbling, but very eye-opening. I think that may be more widely accepted, to realize, hey, we're actually not living on a round planet.
I mean, there's even simple experiments like, when you see water go down a drain, the Coriolis effect, how it's different in the north hemisphere compared to the southern hemisphere. But even more complex things would be we're kind of right at the beginning of space tourism. So what happens when a huge chunk of people go into space and see our planet? Are they going to say, nope, I can't go up there?
Probably, but maybe that'll be the awakening. Is once something like that happens, then I mean, there's no denying it at that point. There's no denying it because you may have like your whole flat Earth community or a large part of it with you, and you can't.
But wouldn't they just say it? Oh, that's because my eyes are round.
Yeah. So it's just making everything. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I didn't really have anything else. I just thought this was weird, and maybe if there are any flat earthers out there, somebody can explain it to me in the comments because I don't get it.
Yeah. I would love some more information and some clarification.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Adios.
Bye.